Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamed in Highland Park, New Jersey. Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School, Long Island. Rabbi Jeremy Kamenofsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. It's great to see you guys.
Great to be here.
Big shout out to my daughter Elisheva has her 21st birthday, the 21st,
Whoa,
which is amazing.
21st.
We remember her, and she is a Bible scholar.
Whoa, I remember her when she was like not even in Kohabim.
Exactly.
Oh, I have a great image of her and a couple of my former students when they were in Nitzanim that summer.
Well, we have a lot of stories, but we have another family story going on in this Parsha, and I would say it's amazing. It's an amazing family story. We're going to call it the reconciliation of Joseph and his brothers. But there's so much going under the surface that I'm actually wondering if this is a reconciliation or if there's just so much unstated that's left unstated and there's tension there. And I'm going to turn to you, Barry, first to tell me if this is disturbing or if there's something sentimental here. And we're going to pick it up from there because we know the story. The story is that Joseph has basically framed Benjamin up until now. He's framed him with the stealing of the goblet, and they're going to take Benjamin into custody. And Judah is basically petitioning Joseph to release him and to replace Benjamin with himself. He's appealing to Joseph's sensibilities, repeating over and over and over and over again, my father, my father, my father, and pushing, I think, all the buttons. And Joseph can't handle that anymore. But and it reaches an emotional peak. But Barry, take us into the difficulty of this moment.
So I go between disturbing and unsettling. And it's kind of ironic in a parsha where the children of Jacob, of Israel, will settle in Egypt, that the aftertaste that the parsha leaves is one of unsettling rather than settling. So I don't really think there's a lot of resolution. I think the resolution is mostly superficial. And I think that there are various clues along the way that suggest that. So after Judah mentions his father many more times than is necessary in his appeal to Yosef, Joseph reveals himself, and his first comment is, Oda Vichai, is my father still alive? Which seems a little bit out of place, as if he couldn't quite process what Judah had been telling him. And I wonder if it is suggestive of some guilt on Joseph's part, because as I think it was Ramban who mentioned, one of the great curiosities is that Joseph makes no attempt to reach out to his father for the 22 years that he is in Egypt. And we often think of this as a story where Joseph is betrayed, but there seems to be an element of betrayal within Joseph himself.
I want to come in and kind of take your side here. I think, which is the sense that there's something unsettling here. That it's not only with regard to Joseph and what he says here, which could have been, a moment of being startled and trying to reassure himself, but it's also a sense that the family equilibrium is in need of restructuring, and that Joseph sees his role as reconstituting the family, and so the family is really on the verge of a breakdown. It's falling apart. And the famine has exacerbated that internal tension. There are internal fissures in the family, and we could do, of course, a little sermonette on the fact that families with internal fissures, those fissures are exacerbated in times of global stress, which obviously we're in right now, and everyone is experiencing on some level. But it's not. I'm saying it's not a sentimental story of the end of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, where all the brothers they hug each other. It's. I think there's something under the line there. Jeremy, do you have a take on this that is counter to ours? You want to come and?
Yeah, I basically do. I mean, obviously, what you're saying is not wrong by any means. And to add one point to the side that I'm not really going to take, but to add one point to augment the position that you guys are taking, 17 years down the road, Jacob is going to die, and the brothers come to Yosef and say, apparently fictionally, falsely, our father said, please don't kill your brothers after I'm gone, which means that after 17 years of living in Egypt and a previous 13 years of Joseph being alone before the brothers arrive, means the 30 years hence, the brothers are still anxious that Joseph is going to take 30 years since they threw him in the pit and sold him in slavery. The brothers are still anxious that he's going to take vengeance on them. So, it's not hard to say that there's a lot of water under the bridge and a lot of hostility and anxiety still, and maybe their reconciliation is somewhat superficial. But I am going to go the other way and say that it is somewhat more sentimental, that Yosef is I can't imagine another answer, that Yosef is the most emotional character in the Torah. He is full of feeling, he is full of tears, and he has been throughout this entire brother episode, when he has at times been cruel to his brothers. He always says that he held himself back, he held himself apart, he didn't let them know who he was, he acted like a stranger to them. He was playing this manipulative, ruler in disguise, and then lo yachol lehitapek. Then he can't hold back anymore, and he says, "Ani Yosef od avichai." I actually am not Mr. Tzafnat Paneach guy in the Egyptian costume. I'm Yosef. I take this identity back. Is my father still alive? Yeah, okay. In a sense, it's strange. And as Barry said, you wanted, if I could write the story to be nice, as soon as Yosef ascended to power in Egypt, I would have had him send a delegation up to Canaan and bring his father back. But I think that the mode is like, I have now returned to my true self, and am I going? He's a child again. Am I going to see dad again? Oh my goodness! And it's an expression of wonder and joy. And furthermore, I just want to say one more thing, which relates to the Haftarah. The Haftarah is Ezekiel. The Haftarah comes actually right on the conclusion of the Valley of the Dry Bones, Ezekiel chapter 37. He's had this image of the people of Israel completely, totally, thoroughly devastated, and they're a valley full of dry bones, and yet they come back to life. And the thing that comes right after that is he says, you shall take these two sticks or these two blocks of wood. On one of them you write Judah, on one of them you write Joseph or Ephraim, and you touch them together so they become one again and not two. Ephraim, Yosef refers to the northern kingdom, and Judah the southern kingdom. And so Ezekiel has this kind of act of almost like ritual magic to take the two symbolic blocks and fuse them. I think it's so incredibly persuasive that I almost think that chapter 45 here in Vayiggash is told with the same thing in mind. Judah, the southern tribes, draw near to Joseph, the northern tribes, and they cause each other to express their feelings. And Judah does something so generous. So I do think that Judah, I got a few more pieces of evidence, but I'll leave it at that. Okay. I think that Judah is doing something in great generosity.
So as usual, I'm a little darker. Barry is, you're with me this time. But we're going to go with the light sentimentality.
I would have one thing, Jeremy. So what you say is quite forceful. And what occurs to me is that when Joseph says Oda Bichai, there's an element of psychological transference, because when he's been in Egypt, Pharaoh has become his father. Yeah. He is the second in command. He is like the favored son of Pharaoh. Sure. And now that his brothers have come to him and he has this chance, as you say, Jeremy, for reconciliation, he recognizes that his actual father, Jacob, is still alive and that he is Jacob's son and not the son of Pharaoh.
Okay. So I just want to make a theatrical comment here, which I've only been discovered on this go through, which is when this moment happens, and Joseph says, "Hotziu kol ish me'alai," get everybody out of here. That is such a theatrical moment. It's such a great moment. It's like clear the stage of everybody, and who's in the room? The only people in the room are Joseph and his brothers. And then it's at that point that he cries, that Egypt is outside. And that, is a beautiful theatrical element also, because they're inside and there's something outside. There's an intimate moment going on inside. Vayishma Be'Paro, and Pharaoh's household hears. But there's one other element here. I'll make my case. One other element, which is, we're there with him. This is an intimate moment of disclosure to the family. And the literary technique here, which is dramatic irony, that we know something that the characters don't know. And by clearing the stage, this becomes a family story. It's an intimate story. And the intimacy is not only between Joseph and his brothers, it's between Joseph and us. We, the readers, at this point in the story, I'm in. I don't know about you guys. I'm betting that you guys are in too. We're all there. This is our family. This is our life. This is our history, and we're there watching it together. Okay, Jeremy, go ahead.
I just was going to say, okay, everything you said is correct, because we do get verse 3 there in that chapter, which is let's just imagine this now, just totally cinematically.
Right.
They're in the room. Judah gives the impassioned speech, and the camera is right there. And the camera maybe even was close up on Yehuda as he gives this impassioned speech. Then the camera pans back, and we see that there's a room full of people. There's 11 brothers and Yosef and whoever else is in the retinue. And Joseph says, everybody out. And the camera goes out too. Because then it's Vayiten et kolo bivchi v'yishma'u Mitzrayim v'yishma bet Paro. Then the camera is now on the outside of the house. It hears the roar in tears, and it sees everybody in Egypt looking around. It sees Pharaoh's house looking around. We're on the other side. But then with verse 3, we get inside again.
Absolutely.
Then Joseph says the words. So I think cinematically, you've got a lot of the cinematic or visual storytelling. I think it does arrive where you say, but it has got that moment of us being on, the camera being on outside the house.
Well, since we're talking about literary motifs, it's also suggestive of the Ohel Moed, where God's voice comes out, stretches out beyond the confines of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. And in a sense, Joseph seems to be a stand-in for God here.
It's also revelation, disclosure, it's concealment, reveal. It's what makes the Torah great. This is the Torah storytelling at its greatest moment. I mean, it doesn't really get better than this moment in the entire Torah. That's what we would propose.
Well, it's the longest single stretch of literary unity.
Right, and it's the most cathartic moment. It's the climax of the whole story, where now, okay, so all the masks are off. We know who we are, and so this is the question that I'm really plagued with, which is, we know who we are, but some of the past is still right in front of us. And will they be able to overcome that? And you've already touched on it a little bit, and we could go a little deeper into it, because there is this whole sense that the brothers don't want Joseph to run their lives, and Joseph very much wants to run their lives. I mean, am I on to something here with this story? Is there a tension between the political structure of the family in terms of who has the power? Is there?
Well, tell us why you feel that. Tell us a little bit more about why it is that the brothers and Yosef have different, feelings of who's in charge, and Yosef has to be in charge.
All right, so I'll go into it. I think the family's in a very, very difficult state when it comes down to Egypt. It's a global pandemic. It's a global famine. Okay, and all the fissures of the family are now really pushed to their breaking point, which is true in all families during terrible times of stress. Um, and what I'm decoding from the narrative is that the brothers are acting as individuals and as factions, and that there is a need to save the family. Joseph wants to bring them all down, to save them physically and to sustain them. That's absolutely the goal here. But there's also a larger plan, which is to bring them down because that's part of the covenantal vision. And while the text doesn't say this, there's the intimation that he knows this, that Jacob certainly knows this. But Jacob is in a weak, he's in a weakened state. He's old. He's been battered by life, and I think that what's going on here is a need to the desire to really reset the family. And
So I think there's a political dimension that we also have to address, because I think the tragedy of Sefer Breshit is that the people end up in exile. And Jacob, alone of the patriarchs, dies in exile.
yeah.
And I think that is something that weighs heavily on him. And when we think of the brothers in Canaan, we could say, in many ways their behavior was despicable, but what they did is they sent their problem away, as it were, Joseph. But now in Parasha Vayiggash, Joseph wins because now everyone comes to him. And what has happened then to the dream of living in one's own land and worshiping God in one's own way? They cannot do it in Egypt. And what happens, I think, in part, is the tension is between assimilation, which is represented very well by Yosef with his Egyptian wife, his Egyptian name, working for the king of Egypt, and the brothers who ultimately are still shepherds. They're still natives of Canaan.
So maybe I'm asking a larger question, which is, can the family reconstitute itself with the family covenant as its central mission?
The question is whether it can be done in Egypt.
Whether it can be done in Egypt on a foreign land, and obviously it happens there. But so maybe the question is,
Actually,
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
The question
Well,
is,
it's necessary. That was,
I think that can the family be reconstituted in Egypt? I'm going to take a stab and say maybe it can only happen in Egypt.
Yeah.
That Canaan has been continually, the place of the dreamed for and imagined destiny, and always a problematic place. And the experience of exile is actually forging togetherness in its own crazy way. They fought like hell when they were in Canaan together, and now they're in Egypt, and they might be able, in the sufferings of diaspora, to attain a different kind of unity. It's hard not to think about contemporary visions of the Jewish people. The Zionist, like at its core, believed, especially in the early days, and some people still today believe in shlilat hagolah, negating the diaspora. Said, no, you really have to leave wherever you are, and the only place for a Jewish future is in the land of Israel. None of us in our lives have made that choice.
No, but it's so interesting, to superimpose on this narrative, the whole diaspora Israel narrative, and certain true elements emerge, which is that modern Zionism was formed not in the land of Israel, but it was formed outside of Israel. I mean, Basel was the first Zionist. Go ahead.
I think the reason why that is because what we have here is ultimately the tension between the family and the nation. Nation building, I think, as Jeremy observed, can only happen outside the land. But in other words, the family can live in the land, but in order to become a people, that, I think in the Torah's terms, has to happen outside the land. So they leave as a family, they're going to come back as a nation.
That's interesting. And
But
I think if we looked closely, we might see, is there some, I mean, this will be homiletical. I'm not suggesting that the Bible has made this choice, but is there like some difference between talking about Beit Yaakov and thinking of that as a family and Bnei Yisrael and thinking about that as a nation? Barry, you said something that I thought was very, very sharp about them being shepherds. When they first arrive in Egypt, Joseph seems to be, not knowing the geography, the real geography, I'm left to sort of speculate based on the storytelling, but it seems to me like Joseph, hearing that they're coming down, stops them on the outskirts of town in this place called Goshen and says, you guys stay here. And when Pharaoh comes and he asks you what your job is, tell him your shepherds. That's going to be good because the Egyptians just hate shepherds.
no,
Hate shepherds.
tell him you are anshe mikneh. You are people of
Cow people.
livestock.
You're cowboys.
Right.
You're cowboys. And they're not going to want you in the city. They're going to want you out here in your own place. And it's going to go well for you and it's going to go well for them. And I think that exactly as you said, Joseph is an utterly assimilated character to the point where they don't even recognize him as a Canaanite, and he pretends not to speak Hebrew, and he's speaking through an interpreter. And he says, you know, the name's Menashe, names his child Menashe, which means God made me forget all that terrible place. My name is Tzafnat Paneach. Thank you very much. And but for his brothers, he doesn't want that path. For his father, he wants a distinct identity, which he, you know, Ani Yosef, I'm not Tzafnat Paneach, I'm Yosef, I'm one of you, and we're going to be living in Goshen.
You know, it's interesting because when we get to Sefer Shemot, and it's going to retell in a few verses this Parsha where they come down to Egypt, and the line is Yosef Hayab Mitzrayim, Joseph was in Egypt, and Rashi's famous comment is that he was Joseph in Egypt, as a youth in Eretz Israel, and he remained Joseph in Egypt as well, which seems in many ways to be a complete rereading of the story in Breshit by Rashi.
Well, back to Jeremy, when you talked about that introduction of the brothers, and we've gone a little bit ahead of to the end of the parsha. You know, the brothers defy Joseph, and they actually do say, "We are ro'ei tzon. We're not going to be told what to tell." I mean, I appreciate the brothers for their brashness and forthrightness, and I think that part of what's going on here is assertion of freedom, and that the shepherd paradigm represents the free spirit, and the Egyptian paradigm is the state, that the state will control you. And in fact, you know, I would say that what we have in this parsha is a kind of glimpse of the totalitarian state. I'm going to hold that idea for a second and go back because it's out of sync, out of step with where this happens, the sequences of the story. There's one element there which is such a profound moment where we talked a little bit about last year, Jacob meeting Pharaoh, and I want to just go into, if we could do that, a little bit of cinematography of that scene where the two of them meet. It's chapter 47, verse 6, 7. Vayave Yosef et Yaakov Aviv. Joseph brings his father Jacob. Vayamideo difnei Pharaoh. He stands him up before Pharaoh. Vayivarech Yaakov et Pharaoh. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh says to Joseph, "How old are you?" And Jacob says, "The days of my life are 130. They've been few and bad. My days, I didn't reach the days of my fathers in their sojourns." And then Jacob blesses him, and he leaves Pharaoh. So can you unpack that for me? Can you kind of tell me what's going on here? It's not only that he's being kind of melancholy.
Well, you unpack it.
I want to.
Okay, I'll unpack it.
Go ahead.
Take you off the proverbial hook. So I think that we have to compare Jacob with Abraham. Abraham at the end of his life is described as dying satisfied in his old age at 175. Jacob, who has 17 more years to live, realizes his life is not the life that he wanted. And I think that what weighs upon Jacob, as I said before, is the idea of exile, because already at 130, he knows that the rest of his life is not going to bring him any sipuk nefesh, any satisfaction, which is astounding given the fact that he's just been reunited with his son Joseph, who we thought earlier was his most beloved son.
Right.
Well,
But
he even says, Amuta hapam, now I can die. What are you, like, you're Russian?
well, apparently. And I think that there's an important lesson here about perspective. We get the sense of Abraham, who had said also after the death of his wife Sarah that God blessed him with everything, that he had a way of picking himself and putting himself together in a way that eluded his grandson Jacob. Jacob has really lived a troubled life, and there have been great moments, but he's battered and bruised. And you asked for a whatever the word is, a film version of the story. So Jacob, I think, is bent over at 130. He's not standing straight. I imagine Pharaoh, because we're just imagining here, in his 50s. So he's kind of looking at this desiccated old man and wondering, what's your story, old man? And Jacob says, it's not a good story. Leave me alone.
I had a bat mitzvah kid a couple of years ago who wrestled with this one. Vayomer Paro el Yaakov, kama yemei shnei chayecha, how many of the years of your life? She read it as, "Whoa, how old are you?" Like,
Yeah, whoa.
Whoa, what are you, like 1,000,000? You are really old. And he's been battered by life, as you said, but it's funny. I mean, I find this dissonant in two ways. First of all, yeah, it's true. He has been battered. He has maybe not had the life, but Abraham didn't have such an easy life either. And Yitzchak, who lived an extra 5 years on Abraham, he also had some trauma. We see Jacob when Jacob is in Padan Aram, he's so tough. He's so successful. He does the thing with the sheep, and he outwits his father-in-law, and he's got 4 wives, and he's got lots of children. He's virile. He's an impressive guy. And maybe by the time then you have the whole Dinah and Shechem episode, and the fact that Jacob does not choose a military or particularly macho kind of response, maybe that indicates that he's in the diminished state. But the man wrestled with the angel, and Sarita im Elohim v'im anashim v'tuchal, and he's wrestled with God and people and prevails. And now we're just like, what's the achen ve bit? I don't really.
So I'm glad you went Yiddish here, because when I look at this scene, I imagine a Yiddish speaking person going, okay, so I've had my knocks in life, and then he looks at Pharaoh and says, you're a Pharaoh, no big deal, you're a Pharaoh, Mazel Tov. I'm not impressed by that, and I get the sense that especially in that last verse where it says Vayetze milifnei Pharaoh, which is Vayevarech, yeah, okay, I give you a bracha and I leave, which is, I'm not impressed by you. You don't impress me.
Well, but I think another way to look at Jacob, he's like the old athlete. His day is gone, and he's living off his memories. And the memories don't console him.
I have one more layer to this.
How could the memories... This is confusing to me. I mean, I'm not disputing that the story does have that tone. I'm just astonished that it has that tone, because the man just said, now I can die a happy man after everything that's happened. I laid eyes upon you again. And later on, when he really is about to die, he will say, I never thought I was going to see you again. And now these are your children. It's Ure Banim Livanecha Shalom Yisrael. And I don't dispute that this passage with Pharaoh does come off as that very depressive, the world weariness. But I just don't get how we went from now I can die a happy man to world weariness.
So I'm reminded of Psalm 49, which Bekitsur in short is you can't take it with you. And I think that Jacob is in this position where he can't really integrate the pieces of his life. And that's why he says things like, now I can die. And I think he's sincere and means it, but he's not going to die for another several years. And he's having a hard time holding himself together because I think the central image is that we come back to the dislocation by the angel, not that he limped into the city of Shechem Shalem. And that shlemut, to borrow a phrase from my colleague Elliot, was destroyed by what his sons did in Shechem. And so we're left with Jacob literally and figuratively dislocated. He's no longer in his land, he's in someone else's land. He's no longer the top guy in any significant sense because his son works for the top guy.
Well, I want to pick up on that because I want to, I'm usually very critical about Jacob in this moment, but I'm kind of sympathetic here. He's had a hard life, and yeah, some of the echo of that early extravagance and the early accomplishment, I still sense there. It's not, we haven't gone to the bottom. He's been at the bottom already, but here he's coming as a father. He's meeting his son's boss. He's meeting the boss of his son, and there are two things that are happening here. One is, you're the Pharaoh, big deal, right? It's like okay, so I wrestled with it with an angel. Sorry. And God spoke to me a few weeks ago. Sorry. You're no big deal. Okay, that's one. The second thing is, wait a minute. This is my son's boss. My son can't lift his finger, okay, without getting permission from this guy. This is not a good situation, right? And there's nothing I can do about it. And so this goes to the end of this parsha, which we kind of highlighted or touched on a second ago, which is what is disturbing to, I think, all of us is that this doesn't end well for the people of Israel in Egypt. It doesn't end well for Egyptians. And Joseph is both heroic and also a little bit, there's something to criticize about him because he is the architect of the totalitarian state here. And this may not be a good thing. That he amasses so much control that and as Pharaoh's agent, that nobody in Egypt can move without him. I don't know if you react to that. Is Jacob? I mean, what I'm sensing, maybe I'm putting too much in this moment, is that Jacob's saying, "Yeah, you're the Pharaoh, and you know what? This is not all that it's cracked up to be. Yeah, you need to watch yourself, Joseph." But he can't say that. I don't know. But maybe that's my sermon.
Well, I certainly think you're right about the analysis of what Joseph does in building power for the empire here. I mean, he acquires all the land, he acquires all the animals, he turns everybody into serfs and sharecroppers, and lo and behold, that creates Egypt as a very rich, very powerful totalitarian state. And by the way, that's going to come to bite his family in their rear ends.
Absolutely.
Well, because I think it underscores for us that ultimately the Israelites themselves become Egyptians by becoming slaves. Joseph made all the native-born Egyptian slaves, and the next Pharaoh is going to come along and make all the Hebrew slaves as well. So that their exile experience ends disastrously.
Yeah.
There is no good in it. And it's not until God redeems them a few weeks from now that we could begin to reconstruct ourselves as a people with a dream and a vision.
And it's all in this parsha. It's all this. I think the tension between Joseph and his brothers, the tension between Egypt and the nascent, community or people of Israel. That tension is there. Freedom and subservience, that's there. The whole understanding of autonomy and Destiny, that's there also. This is
You know,
not a simple parsha.
I would, the way you said that makes me think that of the 5 books of the Chumash, I think that Shmot ends on a big high note.
Yeah.
They build the tabernacle, God's presence fills it, and that's awesome.
How does this one
Breshit,
end? Breshit, go
huh?
ahead. How does Breshit end?
Breshit ends in exile, and we're right at the edge of slavery. And I think that this parasha points us to a very complicated end of Breshit. Vayikra ends with mitzvot about. I mean, it's something else in the final chapter, but it ends with mitzvot about agricultural mitzvot for feeding the poor, because you're going to have a society of tremendous inequality. Bamidbar ends with the mitzvahs of Ir Miklat, because you're going to have murder in your land, and Deuteronomy ends with Moses' death. So maybe each book ends on not a happy ending, but at least a complicated one.
Well, I would add about the ending of this week, because this will segue into next week's parsha, and our time is coming to a close here. This book ends in a box. Joseph's in a box, right? And Joseph is what could represent slavery and the lack of movement more than death and burial. He has nowhere to go, and he's in a box. Go ahead.
But the box can also be seen as a suitcase because it's portable. And Moses is going to take that box with him. And just to add to what you said, Jeremy, Deuteronomy ends with the end of exile, because the very next chapter of the Bible is going to begin the entrance into the land.
The land.
And I think that's an important point as well, is that we end on these down notes, and in some ways, nothing could be more down than the death of Moses, the great prophet. But the very next chapter is going to begin the entrance into the land.
But I would say that Judaism, it is true that the Bible, the next chapter of the Bible, is Joshua chapter 1, and it is the Haftarah for Simchat Torah. But Judaism, as exemplified in the Torah reading cycle, pops us back to Breshit, which is also a story of exile, by the way. I put you in a garden, and then you are exiled from it, and you have to spend the rest of your life trying to return to that paradise. I just want to say one thing about an important character in our parsha that we don't talk that much about: Sarah Asher.
Oh yes,
she's in the genealogy. We refer to one of the daughters. There are some females in this genealogy. One of them is Sarah. She's also in the genealogy in the book of Bamidbar, and so she's like, the midrashic tradition is that she's like the Sibylline oracle. She lives forever, and we know a few things. There's nothing in the Torah about her, but midrashically we have some lovely things, that she is the one who informs Yaakov that Joseph is alive. Because who's going to tell him? If you tell him he's old, he's going to have a heart attack. So she tells him in a very gentle way. And she also is related to the story of Joseph, because she's been alive for the entire time of the Egyptian slavery. She knows where his bones are buried.
She knows.
So Joseph's bones, Moses has to go back and get them to fulfill his promise, to carry them back, to bury them in Shechem. And nobody knows where they're buried. Yeah. Serach bat Asher knows where they're buried.
And as Hilary Mantel said, bring up the bones. But I
didn't read those.
I just want to add one thing.
Are they good?
Great series. I
want
to add one thing though, because your mention of Gan Eden reminds us that the other Gan that's described in Breshit is Sodom and Gomorrah, described like the Garden of Egypt. That the garden does lead to exile, because ultimately it's not where we want to be.
Wow. Okay. Well, we have to bring this Parsha talk to a conclusion. It's not where we want to go. We want to go with life. Vayechi is next week. Jacob lives. And as complicated as these stories are, it's such a joy to be able to talk about them. We want to thank you for watching or listening, and for sharing some of your time with us. We enjoy sharing this time with you, and thank you for all your comments. Keep them coming in on the Facebook, on the YouTubes, or wherever you download or watch our
you watch our podcast, you download our podcast, and And for just $19.99, we will come and
we're gonna get
Talk
that
directly
t-shirt
to you.
and a mug and a T-shirt, and we're so glad.
you should talk to your friend Rick Beato. Maybe we can have a
Yeah, no, look at that! Big shout
Oh,
out!
look at that!
Yeah, look at
Everything
that.
music.
Big shout out. Okay, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Okay, bye bye. See you next week.